where did the thinking process that people were so happy back in the day, that people just got married and lived happily ever after, and now everybody's just sad and depressed? People always suffered. People were always sad, stressed out, depressed, and suffered since the dawn of time. Like, people really think life was way better back in the day. Life back in the day was really about if you're capable or not, if you were successful or not. You were either a somebody or a nobody. 90% of the world was living in extreme poverty. Nowadays, you can have dreams and aspirations, wanting to become somebody. It was a lot harder back then. There was no corporate ladder to climb. You were either a farmer that produced enough food for you and your family for the day, and it wasn't consistent. Food was not guaranteed the next day. People experienced famine and droughts. So food was not guaranteed. You cannot just go to a grocery store and buy whatever you want to eat. On top of being very poor, you were taxed extremely high. You barely had enough for yourself, and the government would still try to tax you very high. People at the top were eating good, and the people at the bottom were suffering. There was no government assistance. There was no help. If you weren't capable, you were gonna starve. Nobody cared about you. And if you weren't a farmer, you either worked for a small business, there was no corporate ladder to climb, or you were a servant for a noble. So you did manual labor for someone that was high ranking in the court or in the palace or royalty. I think the majority of people are not happy, whether you look at the past or the present. People suffered since the dawn of time. It's just something that people didn't really talk about, and people really couldn't communicate from one part of the world to another part of the world instantly. You couldn't just go online and see everybody's thoughts and hear about other people's sufferings. You only knew about how people were doing in your town or village. Being able to go on vacation is a luxury. People back in the day that worked for high-ranking people in the court or royalty never left the place that they worked at. Most people didn't know what it was like or how it was like to live in another town or another city or another village. The only people you really knew were the people in your town, and that was the only culture that you knew. Anything outside of that, most people didn't think was normal. They would think that it was odd. The world just became more accepting and more open-minded a couple of years ago. Like, why do everybody think that everybody was happy back in the day when they got married? Because there was no divorce, or there were very little divorce. Because getting divorced wasn't really a thing. It was something that was looked down upon. Most divorce nowadays are initiated by women. And that's not to say it's a bad thing. If you're not happy in a relationship, why stay in it? If you're not happy in a marriage, why stay in it? You should be able to leave an unhappy marriage or an unhappy relationship. The divorce rate was so low back in the day because it wasn't really even a thing. And even when you were able to get a divorce, it was much harder to get a divorce back in the day. Nowadays, so easy. You're not happy? Divorce. Easy. It wasn't always like that. It was a difficult process to go through. And women didn't work back in the day. They were mostly housewives. So to be able to live a good life, they had to find a good man. Women couldn't really do anything by themselves back in the day. The way the laws worked, the way people view society, it wasn't the right environment for them. It was difficult for them to do anything by themselves. So when they married a man, they just stayed whether it was a good relationship or a bad one. It was just something that they accepted. And back then, women's greatest fear was marrying the wrong man, because that meant living a miserable life, an unhappy and unfulfilling life. Women had to make sure that they married the most capable man and make sure that he was a good man, that he was going to be a good husband. And even when you get into the later times, when women could get a divorce, but it was still a difficult process, it's not like how things are now where you can easily get a divorce. Even if they did get a divorce, imagine not working for 40 years of your life. You're 40 years old, and now you got to get back into the workforce. You know how difficult that is? Most people complain about a 1-year gap on their resume. Imagine never working your entire life. All of a sudden, you're 40 years old, and you got to start working and providing for yourself. Imagine how difficult that was. On top of that, getting divorced was something that was looked down upon. It was tough to get around if you didn't have a man. When women started having the same rights as men, once they were on an equal playing playing field. There was no reason to stay in unhappy relationships. Once women were able to work, get an education, have their own career, there was no reason to settle and depend on a man. So it's now much harder for men to find a wife, because back then, men really was the one that protected and provided for the family. Most women were housewives. So even if a man didn't have any game, if they weren't smooth at all, if they didn't even know how to talk to women, they were still able to find a wife through recommendations, through arranged marriages, and just being a man with a job. There would be women that want to marry you. That's how low the standard was back in the day. Now you can't get away with just having a job. You gotta be good looking, you gotta be extremely capable, successful, know how to talk to women, have game, be charismatic. Men have to meet extremely high standards nowadays. So it's a lot harder to find a wife, especially someone that's wifey material. You know, back then you could look around and majority of women would be wifey material. Nowadays, not so much. The culture have changed. People's values have changed. It's much more modern now. So it's not just about finding a wife. It's about finding someone that's wifey material and someone that you like, that likes you back. I feel like a lot of people have the thinking process where they think majority of traditional marriages, everyone's happy, but that's not really true. Most of the traditional marriages I know, they're not happy. They just stay because they got married and they started a family. Regardless if they're happy or not, it's just something that they accepted. It's just that they're committed. Once they make that commitment, that's it. There's no changing it. It's much different now. People will break up, end marriages over an argument. Over every little thing. You have one little argument, break up. You have one little argument, divorce. You're a little unhappy about something, break up. You're a little unhappy about something, divorce. There's no commitment. Women used to fear marrying the wrong man. Oh, it's different now. Men fear marrying the wrong women now. Because if you marry the wrong girl, when she divorces you, you gotta split half. Everything that you've built, everything that you've earned, you gotta split all of that. The times have changed. And it's interesting to see how times have changed, how things are different now. Like, it really went from women being scared of marrying the wrong man to now men being scared of marrying the wrong women because the laws have changed. Men now have to split half when they divorce. Women get rewarded and men get punished. Life itself feels like a movie. It's kind of interesting to see that perspective of how things were back in the day and how things have changed when you look at how things are now. And at the same time, no matter how good things get, for some reason, people always suffer. People are always sad or stressed out or depressed. When things are really bad, people stress out. And when things are really good, people are still stressed out. It's kind of interesting when you look at how humans are. No matter what, there's always something bad about it. There's always something to complain about. Sometimes I really wonder if we'll really get to a place where everyone's happy. It's like everyone's stressed out because they gotta work a 9 to 5. No one's satisfied with their life. But what if we advance as a civilization and artificial intelligence takes over the world? Robots take over the world, but humans are still in control. And no human has to ever work. Artificial intelligence and robots do all the work. There's no more 9 to 5 to complain about. But then people would still be depressed and stressed out because they feel like they have no purpose, or they have no goals to achieve, or all they do is play video games and watch movies, and they just sit on the couch. They don't ever go anywhere because you don't have to go anywhere. We live in virtual reality or in the metaverse. Everything you could order online and you could get it in 1 minute. Everything is instant. Whatever you want, you could have it. What if we advance that much, but then you never leave the couch? Whatever you want to see, you could see in the metaverse. You could visit it in the metaverse. You don't have to go anywhere. But then people will complain about how they have no friends and no one wants to go outside and meet new people. Everyone just feels so isolated and lonely. So what do? It's like the more we advance, the more depressed people are. It's like humans are trying to make things more convenient and more perfect and try to make other people's lives better. But at the same time, it's making it worse. But then when you look at things back in the day where there was no technology, people suffered from the lack of food. They didn't have enough food. They didn't know if they had food to eat the next day. So it's like no matter where you look in history or what will be history, whether it's the past, the present, or future, seems like there's always going to be something that people don't like. And then people like different things. People have different perspectives. What you like, other people are going to dislike. What you think is right, other people are going to argue. So I feel like there's no way to really create a perfect world. We can only make things better. And as things get better, as old problems go away, new problems emerge. Because now that things have gotten better, now there's a new problem. Whenever you solve a problem, you'll get new problems. And then you'll have to figure out a way to solve that new problem. And as things keep getting better, new problems keep emerging. That's just how life is. Some people think that it would be boring to live forever. But I feel like it would be fascinating to live forever. Like imagine being one of the first humans and being able to live forever and live through all the different times that humans have lived through. From the past all the way to the present and onto the future. See how life was like back then, how the laws were, how things have changed, how things have gotten better, and how things are going to be in the future. And just being able to see people complaining no matter what, and some people are happy with what they have, and seeing people that are ungrateful and people who are grateful, and just being able to see how privileged people are now and how privileged people are going to be in the future, and just seeing them complain. And then you know how life was like back then, how much people suffered, and how people really couldn't do much back in the day. And then seeing the privileged people of the present and the future complain about the opportunities that they have. It would be such an interesting perspective. And I feel like even the most educated people can kind of see that perspective, but to be able to experience it will give you a whole new perspective, and you'll really be able to see the real difference.